Hello, hello. It's John Cope here with Express Yourself RVA, and I am joined here by
Jonathan Paige-Brown Jr.
two Jonathans here on the podcast for this interesting moment that we are experiencing here in Richmond with water and
Oof,
all the things.
oof.
But, we decided to have this conversation that surrounds dance and accessing joy and just how artistic Jonathan is as an artist, a singer, and a dancer. How did you just had this conversation? How did you feel about it?
Oh my gosh, it was great. I always love talking to you. I don't really get a chance to talk so deeply about so many things I like to do. Someone who identifies the same way I do. So it was as elating, it just cathartic as usual. So
Nice.
yeah,
Oh, cathartic's a good word.
yeah.
I feel the same way. Yeah, you're about to experience a really great chat about, dancing and being black while dancing and, being masculine being in dancing. Stay to the end because Jonathan has some great insights as to his future performance on May 18th that has to do with him being able to mix two things that he loves, which is singing and dancing. So here we go on Express Yourself RVA. Enjoy. Like we were like just having our own little conversation before we started this interview, and I want to introduce our audience to who I, John Cope, am talking to. We are here in another podcast edition of Express Yourself RVA, and I am joined here by
Jonathan Paige-Brown Jr. Nice to
Hey.
meet you. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Yeah.
So everyone listening, me and Jonathan, we are quite good friends, I would
Yeah.
say. I love Jonathan because, I get to have really good, real talks with him about all the things. I'm loving that we can, really relate to each other through metaphysical topics
Yeah.
and spiritual conversation and also artistic conversation because Jonathan is a singer. And, if you're not familiar with his work, he is a fantastic country singer. I would love for you to, label yourself. I don't want to
Yeah.
I know you as this, but, for the most part, I would love for you to describe for our audience who you are and, what you do artistically because do so much more than singing as well, which I'm very excited for us to get into a little bit later.
Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time musician, working musician, and also a artist, a soul blues. I would say a Southern Americana musical artist.
I felt like there was a better way to say that than country.
Yeah. There's a thing happening where black folks are kind of reclaiming their southernness. It's been happening since ever, but I think we're starting to get across the other side of not just the reality of what we are, but people finally accepting us into certain spaces and in like a really special way. And so it kind of gives us a second to breathe and choose a word. This is like Afro-Americana is starting to like percolate, and
Love that.
yeah, I love it too. You know, I have a twin sister, Miss Jalen Brown, who's also in the space, and she is really starting to embrace that. And even though we both kind of come from, just like any her genre was opera. She went to the ECU program, and I was a dancer, but like, you know, genres like Americana, genres like folk, genres like the blues and country, they're also cohesive that they can very easily be like as quickly turned into like borders to exclude, as well as just like kind of envelop whole other genres into themselves. And so it's a good time to be clear about what you want to be and who you want to be, what you know, who you want to include in your identity.
Yeah, no, I love that reclamation of identity that I feel Black and brown people of all cultures are doing at this particular time. And, you know, I really appreciate you for being in this particular realm of music, because I feel, you know, it's time for the identity of, you know, especially Black people to be seen more as a multiplicity instead of just one idea of where we fit into based on whatever has been popularized through media or whatever. So thank you for all that you do. And I have attended many of your performances. And, you know, I have to say I am not the biggest fan of the country, Southern, you know, Afro-Americana aesthetic of music. But, you know, I am very open-minded to, you know, when these moments present themselves and when I'm presented with a quality experience, which is what I feel like I've always experienced through your performances.
Thank you.
So, you know, if you haven't heard of Jonathan Paige-Brown Jr., you know, definitely look him up. Where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Jonathan JONATHAN PBJR. That's Paige-Brown Jr. And my website is being finished right now by my wonderful web designer. It'll be jonathanpagebrownjr.com. And yeah, Instagrams and website, Spotify, all the music places, Jonathan Paige-Brown Jr. That's where you can find me, yeah.
Nice. Yes. So look him up, see what I'm talking about. And hopefully this interview is something that will help us all to get to know you a little bit more. And for me in particular, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, you, and as you mentioned earlier, you know, you are and were a dancer. I don't know how much we are considering ourselves that now. Like, will we?
I mean, yeah, once, always, you know.
Yeah, right. So, but not just a dancer. You did ballet.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a beautiful recognition because personally, I don't see many Black male ballet dancers. And personally, I am obsessed with ballet as a Black male being myself. So, you know, I thought we'd dive into that a little bit and, you know, dive into all of the things that encompass that identity. And, you know, for me in particular, I love dance. Like I've been on this year of magical dancing, if you will, magical thinking and dancing, where, you know, I was introduced to the Richmond Ballet's, well, not introduced, but I went to the Richmond Ballet's performance of Dracula last year, which was beautiful. And I know you have history with the Richmond Ballet. And, you know, it was a very interesting moment for me because it, you know, not just did I feel like a kid, you know, again, watching this performance and this production and how beautifully crafted it was. You know, it really made me think more about the intersection between vampiric lore and dance, and especially ballet, just because ballet is very specific and it's very historical in regards to what the standards of ballet are. And I kind of wanted to explore that a little bit more with someone who used to be with the Richmond Ballet in a capacity. So maybe do you want to like tell us what that looked like for you?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, first off, there's some pretty important people to give shout outs to, which is, Ira White, who is still with Richmond Ballet and is one of a couple of black principal male dancers. A teacher, Willie Hinton, who didn't dance for the Richmond Ballet, but taught and fostered a lot of young black males that came through at the same time as me. Brandon Penn, who was a student there when I was a student there, and is now, with Colorado Ballet, Paris Opera, and all those other places. So many other white counterparts, males that like you defined, how to be male in a feminine space, and I look to them for leadership on conduct in a huge way, because it is a white space, and it's a old money white space, but it's also hallowed ground for the discipline of dance, and I just had and have so much reverence for, the seriousness that it takes to hold an art form, in some sort of state of survival, especially as long as they have, because it is hard to monetize art. It was hard to do that in the 30s. It was hard to do that 50 years ago, and it was hard to do that now. A lot of subsidies have come along that kind of help black inclusion in the space, but as a 16-year-old that was mostly into football and walking into space for the first time, I felt very I had just come from military school, and I'd given up a football scholarship to try ballet, and walking into space for the first time, I felt more a pressure to stand up straight and walk the line in a ballet conservatory, I'll call Richmond Ballet, an international company, than I did in military school or wrestling or football or any kind of male centric, discipline oriented kind of endeavor. You felt like you're being watched. And fair enough, yeah, I'm a 16-year-old male that's doing class with tiny little white girls that are all I'm 4 or 5 years above everyone. I'm going through puberty. I look like a grown man. I'm still a child.
Yeah.
So it was scary for I'm sure fathers that are watching me walk in the same room with their daughters in tights and whatnot. So but you try not to internalize, but I was definitely aware of those things and wanted to be sensitive to all the feelings involved as much as I was being included. So already the complexity, you can imagine, there's a tightness in the chest, there's an apple in the throat, but you still have to, be open enough to learn and get better and take yourself seriously. And so, a lot of it's internal. I was treated like everyone else at the Richmond Ballet, which is they have very high expectations for everyone that walks in the door. White, black, women, men. They want you to be your best self, your best body composition that they can imagine, separate from you, whether you're capable of that or not, whether your body thinks that's healthy or not. And it really isn't personal. But it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, and it's not always possible. But again, like, you can talk to anyone who's ever tried to do something very, very hard that was worth doing. It's like, it's a crucible. It's not a vacation, and that's why it's worth seeing at the end of the day, because there's, it's. I will say, like, it like wrestling, football, taekwondo, all the things I did as a kid on very high levels, and like the pain threshold that ballet dancers have is like moons away from what's required in other like endeavors. So
yeah, and like that's the thing that I personally have been like really like paying attention to. So thank you for that, and like thank you for really shedding light on what you said, the discipline of ballet, because it is a crucible, and I'm kind of masochistic, if you will, in a sense. I enjoy the struggle of really pushing myself to limits that I maybe I have a high amount of confidence, I think, in myself, and I always am very curious to see if I can, always, day by day, do more than I did the day before, as I think a lot of us feel and want to strive for in our lives. And I think dance is such ballet in particular as well, like, is just a very great opportunity for someone to put themselves in an environment that really wants to see you at your best, like you said. It's great to know that the Richmond Ballet is, that is an outlet for us to be able to do that. I have personally taken that up as an outlet. I have taken a few dance classes at the Richmond Ballet. I took one of the beginner classes that taught me all of the, kind of introductory terms and movements that dance or that ballet is founded on. And, I even took a second level class, which was infinitely more difficult.
Yes, and who did you take with Miss Massey?
God, I can't remember. It was a while ago. It was actually before the pandemic.
Wow.
So this moment of dance has been a meditation for me for a while. Seeing Dracula, and, I was assigned to do a feature for RVA Mag last year about the performance, but I just really felt like, I really needed more time to think more about the subject and really give it its due reverence when it comes to the importance of ballet, the importance of dance. And, with the advent of Dracula being a part of that, like another something that I'm personally obsessed with. I felt that there was so much more that could be said than, just like, oh, this performance is great. So I wanted to dive into it in a more cerebral and, spiritual context, because I feel like that's where, all of this lands, really, as I've been thinking about it for this past year, as I've been embodying the dancer, and also kind of embodying more of the vampire, if you will. And it's really interesting for me to think about myself as a vampire and think about, what it looks like for a vampire to be in the world that is, definitely impermanent, but being one who is immortal. What does that life look like? What does it look like for you to be one who, while people are your food, right? There's still a layer of a vampire still being human in a sense, because they're too looking for connection. I've taken the whole year to watch all the old vampire movies, starting from, 1922's Nosferatu to, the 70s, where there was an explosion of vampire movies, whether it was Blackula or Andy Warhol's Blood for Vampires, or, a lot of the movies that were coming out in the 70s were based on sapphic vampiric characters, which is very titillating. It's been very interesting to pay attention to all those stories and what all of them have in common, and then just like reading more texts, so taking the time to read Bram Stoker's original Dracula, and I'm very excited to get into Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. And if you have not watched the new Interview with the Vampire on AMC, that is I give it a 10 out of 10, and I highly recommend everyone watch it, just because the performances, the way that the story was portrayed, the photography, the video, the cinematography was on another level. I'm still reveling, but it's just really interesting to think about that, and then to really relate it to dance, because what I've really come to find out is how much dance is an intrinsic part of being human. We have always danced and have always used dance as an outlet for our stagnant energy, used it as a way to uplift ourselves and to relate to each other. And it's just fascinating to be in a society where, I think a lot of us have this interesting fear with dance. I hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't dance. I don't know how to. But it's very curious to me when you think about it, like dance is just movement. Dance, if you can move, you can dance. And, whether you're even in a wheelchair, I've really found myself using my hands a lot to dance, and I love the dexterity of my hands as I wave it around in the air, and there's release that can happen from there. It's just, it doesn't have to look a certain way at all. And yeah, ballet is very regimented in terms of how it classifies dance, but outside of being a ballet dancer, you can employ whatever movements to allow yourself to tap into your inner joy and your inner spirit, right? Because that's essentially what dance allows us to do, is to connect to that, right?
Absolutely. And I feel like I have to, congratulate you for just taking a class. Like, people, you have to know, Richmond Ballet, in the middle of Richmond, Virginia, is a internationally renowned dance company that has its doors open to anyone who wants to appreciate the art form physically in their own body. You can walk in to this world-class place, huge studios, big mirrors, and world-class teachers and instruction. And you can, as a 23, 48, 69, 13, 6-year-old, go in and experience what it means to chase excellence in your own body. And right after that, I have to remind people that ballet is not the only codified technique to explore. And there are other techniques, the Horton technique, the Paul Taylor technique, the Martha Graham technique. In bigger cities that they're a little more, there's more access to. But ballet is the oldest. Actually, no, it is not the oldest. It's nowhere near the oldest, but it is, historically, probably it has the most, I would say, organization to kind of learn about position. But, there are new techniques like the Gaga technique based in Israel that kind of take ballet and ground it in more realistic structures, for your body to deal with gravity and kind of more spiritually connect the mind to the body. And there's just a world of dance out there that is just so worth, pursuing for yourself. I think a lot of people think dance ballet, and then they run away because it is very intimidating. But the Paul Taylor technique, for one, Paul Taylor was a World War II veteran that was under Martha Graham's wing and built a whole codified technique for short, stocky guys to enjoy their bodies and their big shoulders to fly around the room, and like the Horton technique, for the Alvin Ailey Company, like literally a whole codified technique for black bodies, Africanist bodies, to find their strengths in our hips, in our limbs, in our chest. If you're looking at a podcast right now, you can go on Google and just Google Horton technique. And if you are a black person and you see these images of how these dancers hold themselves, you can feel your chest start to expand of like, that looks like it feels good. Because when you look at when we look at ballet, it's like, oh yeah, there's a yearning because of all the the history of imagery, what beauty means to us. And so like we look at ballet and we're like, there's a yearning to fit in that mold. And the thing is, like, black bodies are more than capable of doing ballet. In fact, when I say more than capable, it's like actually, there are ways in which black hips don't necessarily fit into like a fifth position, quote unquote, but also black people are highly capable of a lot of other aspects of dance that, like, say jumping, say different certain lifts. There's athletic natures of dance that the Alvin Ailey Company has like proven that black people are overly qualified to the discipline of dance.
Yeah, and that's like what I've really been taking time to pay attention to for myself. That's why it took so long, really, to really give myself permission to explore that. And now I have so much more homework to do, since you just mentioned all of those different techniques, and I'm very excited. But yeah, I too have been watching, on the Criterion Collection, they have a good amount of videos that feature works from the Ailey school. And, it's very interesting to see those various interpretations of dance that come from, black people and, with black bodies. And it's very fascinating. And, it's interesting for me to think, why don't we see more black people in ballet? And I think a lot of us can understand why, when we think about the oppression and the racial trauma that has been wrought upon anyone really of darker complexion. And especially in the ballet world, because there, I'm sure, historically has been a predominantly white art. So yeah, it's been interesting for me to allow myself the opportunity to break out of that, those confines of what even I think, how I look at myself, and how I can be limitless in my expression and really tap into, that juncture between physical movement and spiritual, energetic movement, and how it actually supports our health. The more that I dance, the more that I feel light, the more that I feel I want to be light. And, that transpires into my day when I'm not dancing. And that's really been the biggest takeaway for me, is like how dance gives us this access to our own inner joy, our own inner child. And, that is really the thing that I've really been exploring. And also, too, when we look back at, generational trauma, especially in our country, and, for the Black experience, I think, we have a lot to unpack there when it comes to just ideas surrounding movement and the ability and autonomy that we have to move however we want to. So that's been a lot of the meditation for me. And I'm very excited to continue to write about this in my next article that will be up very soon after this podcast. Just because I felt that there was so much more that I could go into when it comes to dance and this relationship between ballet in particular and Black being. So I'm sure the Richmond Ballet will love that you have given them such a beautiful shout out. And I too give them a huge shout out because I had that experience of going to this class and feeling very welcome and feeling very catered to in a very equal way with all of the people that were in my class. We all came into it with no knowledge, but we all received the same tutelage. And I wish I could remember the teacher's name. I want to say it's
Susan Massey.
Yes. Okay, great. Susan Massey. Yes. So she was fantastic. And for the most part, it was a fascinating experience. While I did this back in 2019, maybe 2018 or so, I still carry that knowledge with me. When I'm the positions, right? Turning out my feet has been a huge practice, which I'm very proud to say I have come a long way. I'm very, I'm very flexible in general and always have been, but turning out your feet is not easy.
No.
It is not easy, and it's a practice.
Yeah. And what a beautiful, demanding soul, Susan Massey.
Yeah. It's very military. But loving military.
Yeah,
probably the way the military should be.
But the archetype of someone who has high expectations of you, and just the air of confidence in you to do it correctly.
Yeah.
And just the freedom of which she expresses her corrections to you.
Yeah.
And it gives you so much freedom to try.
Yeah.
And actually lock in and be
and not feel discouraged.
No.
Yeah.
And so Susan Massey was my teacher, one of the first teachers I had, when I was going through the school. So, and she is a dedicated practitioner and teacher of ballet and is holding it down at Richmond Ballet for decades.
Yeah.
And it's it's so meaningful to me because I spent basically all of high school under her watch. So to sit here with you, and you're talking about your first dance experience, and to know it was with Susan, I know exactly what you went through.
Yeah.
And it's yeah. She put you through it. I know she did.
And it's I come from I never joined the military myself or was in any, military-esque programs or whatever, but my dad was a Marine. So I've been in the military, from afar or very, very intimately. However you want to look at it. And, I can very much attest to what it looks like for one to be in that environment. And I kind of feel that dance is very on the same level, like ballet in particular, right? Mm-hmm. It's very, regimented, but, the high expectations and the way of which you have to conduct yourself in the studio and outside of the studio when it comes to just taking care of yourself and, maintaining your energy. That discipline is very military to me and very much reminds me of how I grew up, but also in the sense that, it's also in this space of wanting to get you to your top level. And, I find, it's very interesting for me to think about the state of like the male dancer or where that's going right now, or how we can elevate that experience to be more normalized with the boys and men in our lives now, who may have no attachment or desire to endeavor to dance or to do ballet. Why is that not a practice that is highly is as encouraged as football or, taekwondo or whatever? Like, why is that something that we would ever look down upon for a boy to want to enjoy? Like, there's so much strength that can be cultivated, not just physically. Like, you're literally picking up people all the time, right?
Yeah.
And then but outside of that, just you having to hold yourself in and of yourself on stage in a way that's sticking to those standards of ballet is difficult. And when you do it, like when I do it, I'm just like, oh my God, I can turn out my feet and I can hold them. Look at me. Like that's that level of inner confidence that arises when you're able to like do the thing. So like when Susan is like giving you instruction and you're like not doing it, and then like you do it, what? Like that's like a hot, like I get goosebumps right now just like thinking about like what it felt for me to realize like, oh, I can do this. And it just puts you at this whole new level of like recognizing your own capacity to like transcend your own insecurities, your own, ideas of how far you can push yourself. It's just such a great way for us all, no matter what your, how you would label yourself, to really use it as a way to explore yourself, which I think is what dance in and of itself is, whether you're doing ballet or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I used it for. I did have the experience of like using my G.I. Joes and my sister's Barbie dolls to do Swan Lake, like after I saw PBS when I was little. But like,
oh my God, I love that.
I experienced, as far like being masculine in the dance space, like I came to dance to heal my masculineness in a sense. I had done wrestling and taekwondo and football, and that's kind of how I was raised. I too was raised in a military household. My dad was Army. Like I was very incomplete as a man, as a young man. At 15. Not just like being young, but I think what I thought manhood was.
Yeah.
Football taught me that if you have a problem, you get angry and you do it faster and you just repeat.
Right. Right.
Taekwondo was a little more cerebral. It was like, you train, it's very stoic. You're not really you interact with the spiritual through Taekwondo with like respect for your elders and the technique itself. And you don't really talk about, it's not really a space for psychological awareness. It's, but you are learning to defend yourself, and they kind of rewire what it means to be capable, which is good. But by the time I was ready to start dancing, like I was coming from a military school, full ride football scholarship, and I had incredibly horrible anger issues, and I had realized my mother and sisters were scared of me. My dad was always gone, and they told me jokingly, they were like, yeah, we leave the house when you come home from school because you're terrifying. And like I was like, I need to change. Like, who is this person? Like,
oh my God.
And so I came to my mom's bed. I was like, Mom, like I want to dance ballet. Like, and she was like, all right. She took me to Richmond Ballet the next day, and like, my body was very, very capable of doing all the movements that they asked me to a certain extent. There was some changing that needed to be done, but the biggest change was psychological. Like instead of looking outward and like breaking something or someone to like better yourself, it's like you're deconstructing the self.
Yeah.
And your body itself, and like you're like, all right, I don't need this much muscle mass on this shoulder to make this shape. I don't need this much mass on this butt cheek to like close fit. Like, but also like my anger doesn't serve me in my growth.
Yeah.
And I remember I like rage quit, and like we were working on tendus, you know, the time is, for people who don't know, like, it's literally you're just sliding your foot across the floor, essentially, like, you know, very base movement. And I just wasn't getting it, and I knew it was something, like, you know, I just kind of regressed, like,
subtle thing.
it's a subtle thing, and like, I like stormed out of the studio and like went to the locker room and was like, and I punched a locker, like a very football thing to do. It was just like, and like looking, like, I don't know, like, looking back, I can see immediately like how goofy this frustration is and how I was handling it. But like the slow realization from when I punched the locker, hurt my hand, and I'm sitting there, and like it just, I finally came to a place of awareness of like the space I was in. All of a sudden, I was like 10 times more aware of like how fragile the opportunity that I was given was, like how few people had it, and like, you know, and like, what if I like didn't go to the locker room? What if I just punched a window? You know what I mean? Like, what, like I'm glad I had enough space to like do that privately, somewhat privately, because like I'm sure everyone heard me punching a fucking locker. Yeah, sure, everybody saw this big black dude storming down the locker room. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, but there's maturity and a psychological growth that definitely ballet afforded me. It made me a healthier human being.
And I think for me, like, it's that realization that I relate to vampires, because what I've recognized through really all of the stories that I've, you know, introduced myself to is that to be a vampire, you have to have this level of restraint. You have to have this awareness of your own body, what it is seeking, that desire, what is it looking for, and then how do you go for it? And you know, I think what I loved about Interview with the Vampire is that it really depicted what it looks like for a young vampire to become mature, and like, you know, they have to learn, like, you can't go around biting everybody. Like, that's not sustainable. Someone's going to find you out, you're going to be killed. And they're, you know, that is why vampires are so in the dark and in the secret, because, you know, for them to just be going around biting people willy-nilly, you know, yeah, that's an invitation to be killed, right? So I think it's very interesting to think about, you know, if I'm a vampire and I'm looking to, you know, get food, you have all of these faculties within you to do so. You know, a lot of the, you know, there's various, you know, when we look at the various stories that have been told, you know, some people subscribe to the, you know, all of the limitations that vampires, or maybe the weaknesses, I should say, that vampires, you know, have. So like garlic, or, you know, you can't be invited, or you can't go into a home without being invited, or, you know, they have to be in the dark, they will get burnt up. Like Twilight definitely defied that idea, right? So it's like, you know, depending on however you want to look at a vampire, there's the main kind of, I think, traits that I've found is, you know, the ability to read and control minds, and the ability to transform oneself. You know, the common animals that it would transform into is either the bat or the wolf or dog, or you know, or, and then, you know, the whole idea of a vampire is that it is actually speaking to how vampires kind of utilize their sexual potency, their sexual attraction to lure others, especially women, into their arms so that they can feast. So, you know, it has this whole connotation and this whole exploration of, you know, how does, you know, our intersexual drive relate to morality? And that is kind of a contemplation that is the basis of vampire lore, and was kind of the, like when we look at Bram Stoker's interpretation or story, like that is, during that time that it was created. I can't remember exactly the year. I'll put it in the post when I write about it. But for the most part, thinking about how dominant Christianity was to lifestyle, all throughout the world, in particular when he was writing, right? So when we think about how dogmatic sex was seen to the church, to have this vampire that is blatantly using his sexual charm to lure Christian women to their demise, right? Like, oh no, that is like the worst thing that could ever happen in society, right? That's the story. So it's just very interesting to think about how, in dance, you have to tap into, those subtle movements in your body. There's subtle, ability to utilize your body in a way that conveys, whatever it is that you're trying to convey. And then, it goes into how you keep yourself outside of dance. So eating the right things and, going to sleep and, having a schedule. Dracula is fairly regimented in how he goes about his day. So it's just those similarities were very interesting to me. And then I think what I would love to master in my life is the fact that, gentleness is just as strong as aggression. So I think when we look at vampires and, the way that they move, they're not aggressively going for their kill. They're like wooing them in. They're, if we think about, Nosferatu, or even Interview with the Vampire, the one thing that comes to mind is "come to me." If you've watched the new Nosferatu that just came out, that is a huge line in that film. And, for the most part, it's this idea of magnetism instead of electricity, which are the two energies that we all operate off of. So how are we balancing between the two is the thing that we all have to, contend with in this life. And I think looking at vampires, for me in particular, is very inspiring to be able to want to tap in more to that gentleness, and that gentleness that will get me the gold prize, right? And I could, if I was a vampire and I wanted to eat, I could eat whenever I want to, essentially, but how you go about it will determine if you will continue to be able to eat through time without having, external forces seeking to, end you.
And so many parallels to manhood, but personhood, I mean, guys, I see the parallel of, being able to read people's minds, which I didn't know that vampires could do. But reading people's minds too, the power of your own intellect and communicating with other people, and, the tension between, being a powerful individual physically and, reserving yourself to be in a civilized society, just personhood and also dancing, as a man, the garments we wear, we protect ourselves and others, and, the chaste-like dance belts we wear to keep the body under control. And there's no hiding how you take care of yourself if you're wearing, a dance belt and tights. We can see what time you went to bed. We can see what you ate for breakfast 3 days ago. That's why there's so much shame.
And I love that you brought up garments because, I'm obsessed. And, a huge question I actually had was, when it comes to, dance tights, that's something, it's very interesting. So I think maybe that's a huge reason for why maybe men don't, aspire to be a ballet dancer. I think tights in general are something that are associated with feminine bodies. And, so, I think in our society where it's very annoying how I think, we historically as people, have looked at the feminine as, the antithesis of masculinity, and that, femininity needs to be, it's a lesser way of being than masculinity. So I think, as I've looked at or, tried to really hone in on like, why do we not see more men in dance? I can see that being a particular insecurity because, yeah, you have to wear tights. Like they want to see your lines. They want to see what is happening with your body when you're moving. And, that also when you're on stage, it makes for a more clear performance in terms of like what the body is doing to perform. But I love tights. So for me, like even outside of like dancing, like I like people are like, oh, long johns. I'm like, no, man, get yourself some tights because those things are so comfy. They like hold you in, and they like, I feel personally more sexy in a tight than I do in like literally anything. I mean, personally, I'm a huge proponent for like lingerie and intimate wear being worn during the day and just like as just normal clothes because that's literally what they are. So
I will say, I mean, so as far as we're talking about garments, we have to talk about the body. And, like you're a beautiful individual. Like even for a dancer, you have like an elite physique in foundation. But like for just a pedestrian, we'll call them, like you're gorgeous and your body's gorgeous and very, like I would say, like at an advantage to wearing tights. Like you have beautiful lines and strong limbs. It's just like your definition and your musculature is just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thanks.
Not everybody has that. And as usual with masculinity, you mentioned like, part of the problem with masculinity is that we think femininity is not, as robust and resilient as it is. Also, part of the problem with masculinity is that we think masculinity isn't as fragile as it actually is. And so a lot of the toxicity that we feel coming off of masculinity is trying to protect itself. So it doesn't want to be exposed. You're like, if you're wearing a dance belt and tights, there is no, we can see how big you are. Very
unforgiving in that sense.
Well, it's revealing. It's just straight up. So I remember I was zoned from Atoka High School, which is like essentially rich white folks, like poor white folks, like rednecks, and then black folks, working class and lower class, and big football school, whatever. But I was bused to this Appomattox Governor School of the Arts and Technology, which gave me the link to Richmond Ballet, and So I would show up, at Matoaka in tights, like, crop top t-shirt, cut down, dance belt, tights, yoga pants, rolled up, foot warmers, whatever. But I was also like one of the biggest freshmen there. I was being scouted for the wrestling team. I was being scouted for the football team. So like, it's like,
faultless.
Yeah. I was big. I had been working out to play football, and all of a sudden I started to do ballet, and my legs had now grown to ballet size, and my body was still football size. So I looked like a Captain America compared to everyone else. So as much as all the guys wanted to tease me about what I was wearing, like, it's like there's no question the capability of my body at the time. You just like, do you really want the smoke? It's like, and it's not, it's like, they didn't even have to be wearing the tights to feel exposed in their own selves. They just had to see someone else and compare themselves to that person. And that's so much of the weakness of masculinity is comparison. and so much of how we protect ourselves is, you know, protecting ourselves from comparison. And I think that's one of the main, it's like one of the main struggles with, you know, well, that's always been one of the main struggles with kind of defining manhood for Black men in the space. You know, it's like when your manhood itself is fetishized to a certain extent, and then now here's your body in the space with all these other white bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They're immediately going to look for, you know, the things that set you apart, whether it's like your round muscle bellies or your height, or how strong you are, how much you can jump, you know, like attributes of your body that are bigger or smaller than they imagine they are to be. Like, you know, it's like there's a very adult conversation
Mm-hmm.
that happens with the eyes and body language, that, you know, we are, I feel like as a country, our culture is like, has barely started to go through puberty as far as like understanding of how deep that conversation goes.
Yeah.
And I certainly am not well read enough, you know, like to really speak with any authority on like the psychological consequences and you know, weaknesses. But
Well, I think it's so true, you know, everything you just said, but like in particular when it comes to, you know, that idea of comparison being a huge aspect of masculinity and, you know, kind of the thing that keeps males from wanting to, you know, be seen in a certain way, whether it serves serves them well or doesn't. You know, that's something that is an interesting thing for us to have to overcome. And I think once one does overcome that, there is a whole new level of masculinity that one can reach when it comes to really integrating your masculinity with the feminine, whether that's your feminine within or physical external feminine beings in all capacities, whether it's you know, feminine, you know, human, or you know, an animal, or you know, something that has more feminine qualities. Like you know, it's just interesting because, and that's kind of goes along the lines again with, you know, vampires, if you will. Like it's very interesting to think about, you know, how vampires kind of, you know, are very much their sexuality can go between both. So, you know, they use it on both men and women, right? And, you know, it will be it's just an interesting thing for me to think about, like that marriage of like my inner masculine, my inner feminine, and you know, that integration and using both in whatever situations I find myself in. You know, and how beneficial it is for me to recognize, like, oh, maybe I need to employ more feminine attributes of patience, of you know, looking inward, of being empathetic, or you know, just being a little bit more soft in my approach. You know, how powerful all of that can be, and how equally powerful it is for me to be able to punch a locker, or or to be able to be stable in a sense in whatever regard that I need stability, or to, you know, protect myself or whatever, you know. So all of those dynamics are very interesting for me to like explore, and to explore it through dance. Because like with dance, like you have to, you know, especially with ballet too, because I think, you know, whether if you want the art of being graceful and portraying elegance is really an affront for the fact that you are putting a lot of effort into looking that way.
yeah,
So it's like, as much as we see a feminine person being elegant, or anybody who's employing elegance and grace in whatever capacity, there is a level of intellect that has to assess and discern how much of either dynamic needs to be a part of a movement, so that you don't hurt yourself. Because if you hurt yourself, you can't do shit.
Yeah.
So,
one of the most painful things about ballet is that you have to act like it doesn't hurt.
right.
You don't have to act like football doesn't hurt, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's acting tough in football where you don't know. For me, it was like I'm gonna be hyper aggressive and act like I'm crazy, even though I'm scared. Like, and really, it's just like you want to be the first one to impact, and low man, quick man kind of wins. Like, because each confrontation is a car crash.
Yeah.
But in ballet, it's such an interesting intersection from the garments to the masculine and femininity, and to the awareness of being gentle. It's and the dealing with pain, because first off, it's more painful in general to be a woman. We know this. Periods, their cycle, their interactions with men, the different ways in which they're victimized by men psychologically and physically, and how they're subjected to being victimized by each other psychologically and sometimes physically. The female experience is more painful than the male experience. And ballet in particular, being a feminine art form, it is a more painful discipline than any of the more masculine. It doesn't strike me as coincidence, and I know now, but from experience, of why that is. Because grace, it takes more strength to be graceful under fire than it is to be a brute, and whether win or lose. The problems you're solving of big body and small body versus the problem of looking beautiful and alluring, but conveying a message clearly with your body without words, under fire of gravity itself, fighting your body to maintain control. At the same time, it's you find more power in proper alignment in this feminine structure of movement as a man. I learned to jump 2 times higher than I could in football. I learned to lift, from unadvantageous angles, entire human beings, above my head. Way more strength than I ever could imagine having in football and wrestling, because you have to be aligned and you have to be beautiful and make someone else look beautiful and support them in that endeavor and still get it's such a much more complex issue you're solving and a part of. And then back to the garment thing, just to tie it all together, this is a really funny thing that's happening in the gym culture, where guys are realizing that feminine garments, because they're revealing, don't make you look more feminine. They make you look more masculine. These guys that are putting on sports bras and they're realizing oh, these make my pecs look sweet.
Hell
you can
yeah.
see my delts and my abs are popping. Oh, snap.
And you're still covered. People can't say nothing. You're not going to go to jail.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in tights, when you're wearing tights, they don't make you look like a girl.
Yeah.
They make you look like how much of a man you are.
Yeah.
They expose all of your muscles. You can see everything. You're oh shit, I can work on myself. Okay, if you're coming at it from a bodybuilder's perspective, and that's kind of that's a pastime I have is, lifting weights. It's I see the center work of an adagio in ballet, almost exactly the same as, a bodybuilder's routine showing off their physique. And the imagination, the childlike imagination in my mind is imagine a bodybuilder that had, elite level ballet training as well as amazing physique. How powerful would that be?
Yeah.
How powerful is it for a man to be gentle? There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
All the best men I know, all when I hear women talk about men they revere, when I hear men talk about men they revere, wow, that guy was so powerful. He never got angry. He never raised his voice. But we got so much done. You know, he inspired so many people, but, you know, he never hurt anyone. Like power as a man, like is always defined by, you know, what's created, what you held domain over, not what you destroyed.
Yeah.
Yet for some reason, you know, as a boy, like, you know, really the only explanation of man I had was that of destruction of the self and others.
Yeah.
Just like,
It's like that's so limited. Right.
And it's not, you know, it's not completely fair to the instruction I had and the examples I had. You know, I had some really complex and capable and gentle men that showed me the way even before dance. But
yeah,
you know, as a society, we could do a better job of, you know, encouraging men to be graceful.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a very beautiful end to our conversation. I think we can all think more about that last statement, that last sentence you just gave us. Hopefully it's something that will inspire anyone who, you know, is thinking about dance or really wants to push past their own boundaries of expression, you know, whether you go into ballet or not, like just get out and dance. Like I find myself dancing in lines all the time because I'm bored. Yeah. And like, you know, what do you do when you're like, what is boredom? That is stagnant energy. So it's fun and fine to tap it back into your joy and then stand in line again. You know, and like maybe you can have a smile on your face while you do it and time will pass a little quicker, or maybe you'll just like have a great conversation or meet somebody. So I don't know, that's just the logic that I've been living on these past few years really when it comes to dance, and I just really appreciate you you know, affirming my thoughts when it comes to dance. And
thank you for the space.
Yeah.
I have one thing so my next big project I'm working on is a pas de deux between two principal dancers of the Richmond Ballet right now, Celeste and Ezekiel. May 18th at Gallery 5. I will be showcasing my very first dance piece to an original song. The song
my God!
The song's called Gesture. It is essentially, you know, about what we just talked about. You know, what it means to, you know, what it means to hold space, you know, for a feminine in your life as masculine, and like, you know, there's like all the different ways that I've, you know, come short and come victorious, and you know,
Well,
you know, so yeah, in those ways. So yeah, the dance will be, you know, that of heartbreak and requitance and all this other stuff, and then the song is a good old fashioned Southern soulful waltz.
oh my God, I am ecstatic. You heard it first here on Express Yourself RVA, if you haven't already before. But for the most part, I know I will be paying attention to that, and maybe we just need to have a part 2 to this conversation before May 18th, so that we can see maybe what you've learned from that experience. I'm sure there's a lot. You know, it sounds like you're employing all of your artistic capacities in a way that feels very holistic and beautiful and really making an impact. So I would be very happy to be able to chat more about that, and also just like support anyone in recognizing what a talent you are and how you are you know, really being a force and growing and you know, seeking to be your authentic self.
Thank you so much. This is by the way, like